You may already know this, but people are exhausted. And not just physically, but more so mentally. And you can see it in the people around you. And if you're actually honest, you may even recognize it in yourself. So people are overwhelmed, emotionally drained, constantly distracted, and somehow always still chasing the next thing. And we've become so used to living like this that we've started calling it normal. We say things like, oh, that's just adulthood. That's just life. But I don't think it is. I believe we've actually normalized a way of living that goes against how human beings are actually designed to live. So the modern world, right, has given us incredible convenience. We can order almost anything from our phones. We can communicate instantly with people across the world and automate many parts of our lives. And yet, despite all of that, people have never seemed so mentally exhausted. We're constantly connected, yet we feel lonely. We're constantly entertained, yet we feel empty. Just think about it. We're constantly busy, yet rarely ever feel fulfilled. The promise was that modern life would make things easier. And instead, for many people, it's simply made life faster, but not in a good way. We commit to routines. We become more productive. We optimize our schedule. And at first, it feels great, right? It feels absolutely fantastic. But then something strange happens. That very routine that once helped you is all eventually becomes another thing we're trying to survive. And that's the trap. Okay, so the human mind was never designed to process endless notifications, constant comparison, 24-hour news cycles, and algorithms competing for our attention every second of the day. All of that turns on the fight or flight mode permanently. So maybe burnout isn't a personal failure. Maybe it's actually a predictable response to the environment we are living in. Now, here's what I find fascinating. So long before smartphones, social media, and modern capitalism existed, ancient traditions and their teachings were actually already warning about this. So we have different cultures, different religions, different periods in history, yet they all seem to arrive at the same conclusion. And it's very interesting to me because these very teachings the ancients taught, we actually naturally yearn for, seek, or even try to seek when we become so depleted by life, right? So essentially, human beings suffer when they become consumed by the external world. And that's what it is. Each ancient tradition offered practical wisdom for protecting ourselves from it. So whether you see these teachings as spiritual, philosophical, or simply psychological, they still have something very valuable to teach us. So the first comes from the Buddha. The Buddha taught that suffering isn't simply caused by hard work or difficult circumstances. It's actually caused by craving, by constantly needing life to be different from how it is. And today, that craving shows up everywhere. So we crave more money, more success, a bigger house, more recognition, a better body, a better job, a better version of ourselves. The modern world encourages that craving because it keeps us consuming, producing, and comparing ourselves with everyone else. So the Buddha's solution wasn't to stop living. It was to stop tying your inner peace to the things outside of your control. So you can still have goals, right? You can still work hard, but just don't allow your happiness to depend entirely on reaching the next milestone. Because once you do, there would always be another one waiting. The next teaching comes from the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah teaches that burnout happens when we spend all of our energy pouring ourselves into the external world without ever returning to ourselves. So be it work, relationships, responsibilities, performance, achievement. Eventually, after all of that, there's nothing left. So this is important, and that's why you will notice within the teachings of the Kabbalah, the Sabbath is extremely important, and they instruct everyone to implement the Sabbath into their way of living, not simply as a religious ritual, how dogma now teaches, but rather as a principle. So, okay, for one day, you stop trying to control everything. You stop striving. You stop measuring yourself by what you've accomplished. You disconnect from the endless pressure to produce. In today's world, I think that's one of the most radical things a person can actually do. Because we're constantly made to feel that if we stop, we will fall behind. But maybe the opposite is true. Maybe if we never stop, we slowly lose ourselves. Now, the Bible offers another perspective, but through the story of Elijah. And it's actually one of the most overlooked stories about burnout. And it's remarkable because it describes something that millions of people still experience today. This is the story. After one of the greatest victories of his life, Elijah completely collapsed. He became so overwhelmed that he fled into the wilderness. He sat beneath a tree and asked to die, literally. And eventually he hid inside a cave. And I think many people know what that cave feels like. And it's not a little cave, but the feeling of, wanting to switch your phone off, wanting everyone to leave you alone, wanting to disappear for a while because you simply have nothing left to give. So that cave could possibly just be your bedroom. And what's remarkable is what happens next. God doesn't tell Elijah to work harder. He doesn't shame him for feeling exhausted. Instead, Elijah is given food, water, and sleep. Only after his body begins to recover does he receive clarity. Then comes one of the most powerful moments in the story. So Elijah experiences a great wind, an earthquake, a fire. But God isn't found in any of them. So only after the noise passes does Elijah then hear a voice, but it's a still small voice. And I think that's incredibly relevant today. So just hear me out. Our lives are full of noise, notifications, breaking news, social media, opinions, algorithms. We are constantly surrounded by other people's voices, and then we wonder why we struggle to hear our own. So sometimes clarity doesn't come from searching harder. Sometimes it comes from becoming quieter, being guided by our own intuition and higher self to do what is right for us. Then there are the Gnostics, okay? So the teaching from the Gnostic side, they had a very different perspective. They believed much of human suffering comes from being trapped by the material world. Not because possessions are evil, but because we begin believing our value depends on them, literally. Status, money, recognition, success, right? The modern world constantly tells us who we should be. So the Gnostics, what they actually did is they encouraged people to question those ideas, to discover who they actually are beneath the conditioning. Basically, to stop looking outside themselves for a sense of worth that can actually only be found within. And when you look at these ancient teachings together, right, something interesting starts to happen. So, the Buddha tells us to let go of endless craving. The Kabbalah teaches us to regularly step away from striving. The story of Elijah from the Bible reminds us that silence often brings clarity. And the Gnostics, they encouraged us to stop searching for our worth in the external world. So these are different traditions, the same direction. And, this pattern doesn't just appear in these primary teachings, right? You can see it again in Stoicism, in Taoism, even in Sufism, and actually the earliest strands of Hindu philosophy. So these are all different places, different languages, different eras, but they all seem to point towards the same underlying principle. So instead of leaving you to piece everything together yourself, here's what I believe is the practical blueprint these teachings leave us with. First, protect your attention. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources. Spend less time on your phone. Reduce unnecessary notifications. You need to question whether you're consuming information because it's helping you or simply because it's there. Second, build genuine periods of rest. Not distraction, but rest, okay? So create time where you step away from work, productivity, and the pressure to constantly improve yourself. Third, simplify your life. Modern society teaches us that more is always better. More money, more possessions, more status. Ancient wisdom often points us in the opposite direction, which is want less, compare less, and consume less. Fourth, practice being present. This is probably one of the most important, all right? When you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. When you're with your family, be fully with them. Immerse yourself fully in the conversations you have with them, the time that you are spending with them. Much of our exhaustion simply comes from living mentally in tomorrow while physically existing today. Fifth, stop measuring your worth by external achievements. Your value isn't determined by your salary, your job title, your followers, your likes, or how productive you were this week. Every tradition we've looked at today points back towards finding your worth internally rather than externally. 6, spend time in silence without your phone, without music, without constant stimulation. It's very difficult to hear your own thoughts when someone else's voice is always spinning your mind. And finally, just please protect your energy. Learn what drains you, learn what restores you. Not everything deserves your attention, and not everyone deserves your time. You have to start becoming intentional where your energy goes. Because where your energy goes, your life follows. And it's extremely important in today's world. And if there's one thing I've taken away from studying these ancient teachings, it's this. I don't think they were trying to teach people how to escape the world. I think they were teaching people how to remain themselves within it. And if truth to be told, the modern world, which we currently live in right now, isn't going to slow down. It will continue asking for more of your attention, more of your time, more of your energy. And that, honestly, probably isn't going to change. But what can change is your relationship with it. You don't have to keep chasing every expectation. You don't have to keep comparing yourself with everyone else. You don't have to live as though your worth depends on how much you produce. And maybe surviving the modern world isn't about becoming stronger. Maybe it's about becoming more aware of where your attention goes, more aware of what drains you, more aware of what truly matters. Because I think that's what the ancients understood. The world will always try to pull your attention outward. That is literally what it was designed to do. And wisdom has always invited it back inward. And perhaps that's the real hidden teaching. Not how to escape modern life, but how to live in it without losing yourself.